Last week I spoke about Samuel. Now last week we saw Samuel just being born. Now he's a grown man, and when we talked about him being born, we talked about about judges, and what the judges were was, well, before things were really established, Israel was just a conglomeration of 12 different tribes. And what a judge was during a time of crisis or time of say, whether usually it was a military crisis, but sometimes it was a moral crisis, or sometimes it was an economic crisis, such as failure of crops or something. A judge or a strong person would be raised up, and he would take charge, and he would lead the 12 tribes. Now, usually they remember, but every once in a while it was a woman who was a judge as well. And that was something, when we take a look back at the Bible and say, well, geez, the Bible is so regressive and everything like that, still we see women, as a judge, taking military control over all the tribes of Israel and winning great battles. Samuel was the last judge. Samuel was that one who transitioned, or was that bridging piece that saw Israel going from a conglomeration of 12 loosely associated tribes to a nation. And in that we see a transition to that of a king. And we see that transition right here. Now, a lot of people say, well, geez, J.D., these stories are so old. What relevance do they have to us here today? What do we care about a judge living many years ago and some of the things that happened to him? Well, that's my job. And we'll see that though these stories are very old, they speak to something so very current and so very powerful, the forces acting in our life here today. So let us begin. 1 Samuel 8, a bunch of verses. So all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. And they said to him, "You are old, and your sons do not follow your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have." But when they said, "Give us a king to lead us," this displeased Samuel. So he prayed to the Lord, and the Lord told him, "Listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you that they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king, as they have done from the day I brought them up out of Egypt until this day, forsaking me and serving other gods. So they are doing now to you. Now listen to them, but warn them solemnly and let them know that the king who will reign over them will claim as his rights." Samuel told all the words that the Lord of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. He said, "This is the king who will reign over you, will claim as his rights. He will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses, and they will run in front of his chariots. He will take a tenth of your grain and your vintage and give it to his officials and his attendants. Your male and female servants and the best of your cattle and donkeys he will take for his own use. He will take a tenth of your flocks, and you yourselves will become his slaves. When that day comes, you will cry out relief from your king that you have chosen, but the Lord will not answer you in that day." But the people refused to listen to Samuel, saying, "No, we want a king over us. Then we will be like the other nations." Then Samuel heard all that the people said. He repeated it before the Lord. And the Lord answered, "Listen to them and give them their king." Interesting story, don't you think? Like I said before, people often say, well, geez, these stories are so old. About people who lived and died many years ago, thousands of years ago. How is that relevant to me here today? And yet here is the nation of Israel asking for a king so that they could be like every other nation. They were willing to give up their special connection with God. They were willing to give up their worship of God. They were willing to give up God's central place in their lives in order to be just like everyone else. Does that sound familiar? Giving up what is sacred, what is true, just to be like everyone else. That's what we're doing here today. We've taken prayer out of our schools. We've taken prayer out of our council meetings. There is no more Lord's Day. We sacrifice that for yet another shopping day. We've sacrificed this to be like everybody else. But what does that mean? What does that mean for us as a nation, as a people? What does that mean for us as individuals living our lives? Well, before we get into that, I want to tell you a story that my father used to tell every once in a while. It seems like some prowlers broke into Thompson and Sutherland's, a department store in Glace Bay. They successfully entered the store, staying just long enough to do what they came to do. And then they escaped unnoticed. Now, what was unusual about the story was what these fellows did. You would think someone breaking in, a prowler breaking into a department store would steal something, but they did not. They didn't take a thing. No merchandise was stolen. No items were removed. But what they did do seems ridiculous. You see, instead of stealing anything, they changed the cost of everything. Price tags were swapped. Values were exchanged. These clever pranksters took the tag off a $400 camera and stuck it on a $5 box of stationery. The $15 sticker on a hardcover novel was placed on an outboard motor. They replaced everything. They repriced everything in the store. I was thinking about Jackie. Crazy, don't you think? You bet. But the craziest part of the story, the part that used to make my father almost fall off the chair laughing, was what happened the next morning. The store opened as usual. The employees went to work. Customers began to shop. And the place ran as normal for 4 hours. 4 hours before someone noticed what had happened. 4 hours. Some people got a great bargain. Some people got fleeced. For 4 solid hours, no one noticed that all the values had been swapped. Hard to believe. But it shouldn't be, because we see it happening every day. Just listen to your news. We are being deluged with a distorted value system. We see the most valuable things in our lives being peddled for pennies. And we see the cheapest smut going for millions. The examples are abundant and besetting. Dr. Morgenthaler, who made millions killing unborn babies, given the Order of Canada. I heard a documentary on CBC Radio not too long ago that 1/4 of the teenage girls in the town of Yarmouth in Nova Scotia will be pregnant before they graduate high school. 1/4. One girl they interviewed gave birth to her first child at 13, then to her next one at 17, then to her next one, at 13, 17, 13, 15, and 17. I read a report stating that 26% of all food items in convenience stores will be thrown in the garbage bin uneaten. while there seems to be more and more need at food banks. Why do we do what we do? Why do we take blatantly black and white issues and paint them gray? Why are priceless values trashed while senseless standards obeyed? What causes us to elevate the body but degrade the soul? What causes us to pamper the skin while we pollute the heart? It's like someone broke into the store and exchanged the price tags. Thrills are going for top dollar, but the value of the human condition is at an all-time low. All this started happening when we started taking God out of our lives. And the Lord told him, listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you that they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king. Now listen to them, but warn them solemnly and let them know that the king who will reign over them will claim his rights. When we take the creator of creation, all we have is a meaningless accident. If we were created by some big bang, if we were created by some cosmic fluke or random chance, then humanity was an accident and so are our lives. There's no meaning to or purpose to our lives. If there's no reason behind our being here, then there's no reason for us being here. Our lives came from nothing, and ultimately they're going nowhere. But wait, there's more. If there is no God, if we have no destiny, then we have no duty, no obligation, no responsibility. If there is no God, then we have no guidelines to live our lives, to measure our life by, no goals to aspire to. If there is no God, who is to say what is right or wrong? Who is to say that a husband can't leave his wife? Who is to say that we have to look after our children? Who is to say that we can't abort a child? Who is to say that I can't walk all over you to get to the top? It's your value system against mine. There's no absolutes, no principles, no ethics. Society is reduced to the least common denominator, and life is reduced to weekends, paychecks, and a quick thrill or two. If a person has no duty or destiny, the next logical step is that a person has no value. If you don't have a future, you're not worth much. We've all seen the result of this kind of thinking. We create false value systems to make ourselves feel important. We say that we're valuable if we are pretty, or if we are smart, or if we can produce. We say that a person is important or valuable if they have a PhD or can score a hat trick in a hockey game. We say that a person is valuable if they have a six-figure income or drive expensive cars. In our society, value is measured by two criteria: appearance and performance. Pretty tough system. Where does that leave the mentally challenged? Where does that leave the elderly? Where does it leave the unborn baby? It leaves us feeling useless and worthless. It leaves a lot of us on the outside looking in. Just yesterday, I came across a report while I was doing my readings. A report that in the United States, the wealthiest nation on earth, the one who claims to have the greatest liberties and the greatest freedoms, whose Constitution declares life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as their greatest foundational parts, suicide has increased by 25%. over the past 10 years. That is the result of these systems. But here's the good news. The good news is that that's not how God values us. No, sir. God's plan is much brighter. You see, if there was anything that Jesus wanted everyone to understand, it was this. A person is worth something not because of what he has done, or what he owns, or what he can make, but simply because he is a person, or she is a person. You have been made in the image of God. The tall ones, the fat ones, the short ones, the thin ones, the ones that talk with a lisp, the black ones and the white ones, the yellow ones and the red ones. We have been made in the image of God, and you are loved by God. A person is worth something not because of what he or does done or what he can make, but simply because you are a person. Zacchaeus. Remember that? Zacchaeus, that wee little man, and a wee little man was he? He was shunned by everyone, and Jesus befriended him. That untouchable leper that asked for a cleansing, Jesus touched him when nobody else would. The blind man huddled on the side of the road, Jesus healed him. The woman who was about to be stoned because she had an affair with a married man, Jesus defended her when everybody else picked up stones. And let us not forget the thief crucified next to Jesus Christ. Do you remember that guy who said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom? If anyone was worthless, that guy was. If anyone deserved to die, that man probably did. He admitted it himself. If anyone was a loser, this guy was probably on the top of the lips. Perhaps that's why Jesus chose him, to show how valuable people are in the eyes of God. We don't know if this man had ever seen Jesus before, but when that thief looks over, what he sees is a beaten, cut, bleeding, nail-pierced preacher whose lungs are now gasping for air. But despite of all this, the man never looked better to this thief. And somehow he realized that even though all he had was a prayer, he finally met someone that he should pray to. Any chance that you could put in a good word for me, preacher? Any chance that you'll remember me when you come into your kingdom? And the response, I tell you the truth. Today, you'll be with me in paradise. Now you might ask, why did Jesus do this? Jesus did this because God's love is not dependent upon what we do for him. Not at all. In the eyes of the King, you have value simply because of who you are. You don't have to look as good as me. You don't have to be the first in the race. You don't have to have a ton of money in the bank. You don't have to have letters written to you calling you your holiness. Your value is inborn. Remember that. Your value is inborn. Remember that the next time society tries to take that precious treasure sticker off your soul and tries replacing a bargain basement price tag to your self-worth. Remember that the next time someone tries to make you feel worthless or useless. It is Jesus who has already set a price for your soul. And he found it to be priceless indeed. Why do we want to be like everybody else? When God himself has said, you are my unique handiwork. You are my treasure. You are my masterpiece. What is the difference with being one of the crowd and a unique masterpiece? Is that in the eyes of God, in the eyes of the church, in the eyes of fellow Christians everywhere, you are valuable. You are made in the image of God. That God will go to any length to bring you home. And indeed, he paid the greatest price to make sure that one day, when our time is over on this earth, that the door is open and the light is bright to guide you home. To which I can only say, thanks be to God and amen.